In 1944, the skies over the Pacific were beginning to shift. After a string of bitter defeats, Japan's once dominant air force was losing its edge. Veteran pilots were dwindling, outdated tactics persisted, and their aircraft struggled to keep pace with America's wave of technological advances. On the other side, the United States was flooding the front lines with modern fighter planes, and with them, a new generation of young men, well-trained, fearless, and hungry for victory. Among them was a name few had heard before, a 24-year-old pilot who belonged to no legendary squadron, hailed from no elite academy. Yet, in less than 2 years, he would become a terror in the skies, a living nightmare for Japanese aviators from New Guinea to the Philippines. They whispered of a strange fighter, twin-boomed, lightning fast, and always trailing fire and death. But what they feared most wasn't the aircraft itself. It was the man flying it, a farm boy from rural Wisconsin named Richard Dick Bong. Armed with his P-38 Lightning and a courage that never wavered, Bong carved a chapter of heroism into the vast sky of the Pacific. That extraordinary journey began to take shape in the earliest days of his childhood. Richard Bong was born in 1,920 inches, the small town of Poplar, Wisconsin, into a large farming family. From an early age, he was fascinated by the sky and the roar of metal birds overhead. That passion grew with him, until the day he decided to pursue the life of a pilot. In 1941, he joined the U.S. Army's flight training program and quickly stood out for his precision in aerial gunnery and natural discipline. By early 1942, Bong was commissioned as a second lieutenant and became an instructor at Luke Field. Beneath that disciplined exterior, however, was a wild streak not easily contained. During one posting near San Francisco, Bong took his P-38 on a reckless low-level flight, swooping beneath the Golden Gate Bridge, and at one point, flying so low over Oakland that the jet wash from his engines reportedly blew a clothesline clear off its poles. The stunt earned him a temporary grounding. But instead of cutting him loose, General George Kenney, commander of the 4th Air Force, chose to keep him. His reasoning was simple. "Without boys like you," he said, "I wouldn't have an Air Force at all." Not long after, General Kenney personally sent Bong to the Pacific Theater. In September 1942, at just 22 years old, Richard Bong officially entered the war, where he would soon become a haunting presence in the skies over Southeast Asia. Air combat in the South Pacific was unlike anywhere else: dense jungles, punishing weather, and an enemy seasoned by years of experience. But Bong wasted no time proving he was more than up to the challenge. On his very first combat mission, the 27th of December, 1942, he shot down 2 Japanese aircraft, a Zero and a Val dive bomber, over Buna. The performance earned him the Silver Star on the spot. Bong had his own distinct formula for success: get in as close as possible before firing. It was a bold, almost reckless method, but brutally effective, especially when paired with the concentrated nose-mounted firepower of his P-38 Lightning. In the following months, his skill only sharpened. During the Battle of the Bismarck Sea in March 1943, amid chaotic skies filled with flak and fighters, Bong downed another Zero. By then, he had developed a habit. He wouldn't fire unless the enemy filled his gunsight entirely. He never considered himself a sharpshooter, so he made up for it with nerves of steel and a cold-blooded instinct to close the distance, sometimes so close that he flew straight through the debris of exploding enemy aircraft. By early April 1943, with his 5th confirmed kill, Bong officially earned the title of Ace. On one occasion, he collided mid-air with a Japanese plane. His opponent exploded, while Bong's P-38 suffered heavy damage. Still, he managed to land safely. Another pilot might have quit after that. Bong didn't. In the unforgiving skies of the Pacific, he chose to fly closer, take greater risks, and strike with deadly precision. The victories kept coming. On the 26th of July 1943, Bong was assigned to escort American bombers on a mission over New Guinea. As the formation neared its target, a swarm of Japanese fighters swept in. Unshaken, Bong climbed sharply and then dove straight into the enemy formation from the direction of the sun, a tactic so sudden and blinding that the Japanese pilots barely had time to react. In the chaos that followed, Bong shot down 4 enemy fighters within minutes. It was an astonishing feat, nearly doubling his tally in a single day. For that, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest military honor in the US Army, just below the Medal of Honor. From that moment on, Richard Bong's name was no longer a footnote. He was fast becoming a legend among America's fighter pilots. Richard Bong wasn't just a nightmare in the skies. He also earned deep respect for a kind of courage that, at times, defied belief on the ground. In the middle of 1943, an American pilot was shot down in the crocodile-infested swamps of New Guinea, where the threats lurking beneath the surface were every bit as deadly as enemy bullets. As 3 soldiers paddled a rubber boat across the lake to reach the downed airman, Bong circled above, providing air support. From the cockpit, he suddenly spotted a massive crocodile cutting through the water, speeding toward the rescue boat like a living torpedo. Without hesitation, Bong pushed his P-38 Lightning into a steep dive, skimming just above the lake, and squeezed the trigger of his 20mm cannon. The rounds tore across the water and struck true, killing the crocodile just meters from the men below. A local newspaper later ran the headline, "Lightning Kills Gator," a nod to both the beast and Bong's ferocious aircraft. If Japanese pilots feared the flash of silver wings above them, perhaps even the swamps had learned to fear him. The young man from Wisconsin had proved he could shoot down more than enemy planes. He knew how to stop whatever threat dared cross his path. After nearly 18 months of continuous combat, Bong returned to the United States in late 1943 for leave and to help promote the war bond campaign. Back in Wisconsin, he was welcomed home as a national hero. During this time, he met and began courting a young woman named Marjorie Marge Vattendahl. That romance became another source of strength for him. When Bong returned to the Pacific in early 1944, he painted her name and even her photo on the nose of his P-38 Lightning, a personal good luck charm that flew with him into battle. By then, Bong had already tallied more than 20 aerial victories and stood as the top ace in the 5th Air Force. But he wasn't ready to stop. In April 1944, stationed once again in New Guinea, he continued to fly combat missions unofficially. Though officially designated as a gunnery instructor, Bong repeatedly asked to be included in active sorties. On April 12, he shot down 3 more Japanese aircraft in a large-scale dogfight. This brought his total to 27, officially surpassing the long-standing record of 26, held by World War I ace Eddie Rickenbacker. At just 23 years old, Richard Bong had become the most successful American fighter pilot in history at that time. The news catapulted him to fame across the military and national press. He was promoted to the rank of major, and General Kenny ordered him back from the front to meet with General Hap Arnold, head of the Army Air Forces, and to participate in morale-building efforts at home. But speeches and ceremonies were never what Bong truly wanted. His passion was flying, and his heart remained with the men still in combat. Just a few months after returning home, in mid-1944, he requested reassignment to the front as an aerial gunnery officer with the 5th Fighter Command. While his official duty was to train new pilots, Bong insisted on being allowed to fly whenever the chance arose, and every time it did, he was ready. In October 1944, Allied forces launched the campaign to liberate the Philippines, beginning with landings on the island of Leyte. Major Richard Bong and his fellow P-38 pilots were deployed to the forward airstrip at Tacloban to provide critical air support. Less than half a day after arriving, Bong was already airborne. Just 5 hours after touching down on Leyte, he took off and shot down a Japanese Ki-43 fighter over the island. The American press reported the feat with astonishment, noting that Major Richard I. Bong had scored his 31st kill within 5 hours of arriving in the Philippines. It seemed that all he needed was the scent of war in the air to be at full throttle again. As October gave way to November, fierce dogfights erupted across the skies of the Philippines and the region surrounding Borneo. Though Bong's role was officially that of a gunnery instructor, He was under no obligation to fly combat missions, yet he volunteered repeatedly, actively seeking out missions that most would have declined. His willingness to put himself in harm's way earned him deep admiration from his peers. In just over a month, from October 10 to November 15, Bong shot down 8 more enemy aircraft during intense aerial battles defending Balikpapan and supporting operations over Leyte. These were not easy missions. They involved low-level attacks on heavily defended enemy airfields and solo engagements against swarms of Japanese fighters to protect his fellow pilots. Despite the risks, Bong always returned. His plane often came back riddled with bullet holes, but he himself remained untouched. By mid-November, his official kill count had climbed to 36. For his continued bravery and unmatched success, Bong was nominated for the Medal of Honor, the United States military's highest award. But his combat record didn't end there. In December 1944, Bong continued flying sorties across the Philippines in his P-38, which bore the name and photo of his fiancée, Marge. On December 7th, during air support operations for the American landing at Ormoc Bay, he shot down 2 more Japanese aircraft, one a Ki-21 bomber and the other a Nakajima Ki-44 fighter. Over the following days, he claimed several more victories, mostly against agile Ki-43 Oscars. Finally, on the 17th of December, 1944, Bong scored what would be his last confirmed kill, shooting down a Japanese fighter over Mindoro. That victory brought his total to an even 40 enemy aircraft destroyed. It was a record no other American fighter pilot had ever achieved. Even Thomas Maguire, the second highest scoring ace, finished with 38. Remarkably, both men had flown the same aircraft throughout their combat careers, the twin-boomed, fearsome P-38 Lightning. For his extraordinary accomplishments, Major Richard Bong was awarded the Medal of Honor by General Douglas MacArthur, Supreme Commander of Allied Forces in the Southwest Pacific. During a special ceremony in the Philippines in December 1944, the medal recognized Bong's courage that went far beyond the call of duty. Although he was technically a gunnery instructor, not required to fly combat missions, he had voluntarily flown countless dangerous sorties and downed a staggering number of enemy aircraft in a short span of time. To both General MacArthur and General Kenny, Bong was more than just an ace, he was a national treasure. And to protect that treasure, the High Command made a difficult but unanimous decision. Immediately after Bong reached the milestone of 40 confirmed kills, he was pulled from combat and sent home in January 1945. He had done more than his share, and now, they believed, he had earned the right to rest. Bong's achievements didn't just inspire admiration among his fellow pilots, they deeply unsettled Japan's Air Force as well. Every time a P-38 Lightning appeared over the South Pacific, Japanese pilots instinctively tightened their grips on the controls. That strange-looking twin-boomed fighter, fast, powerful, and devastatingly armed, had become a symbol of American aerial dominance. In the eyes of Japanese pilots, the P-38 was less a machine than a monster of the skies, hard to chase, hard to hit, and particularly lethal when diving from high altitude. Among them, it became known by a half-joking, half-dreadful nickname: 2 planes, 1 pilot. But in truth, it wasn't the aircraft that terrified them most, it was the man flying it. In Bong's hands, the P-38 wasn't just a weapon, it was a surgical instrument. He didn't fly with flair or flourish, he didn't waste motion or indulge in dramatic maneuvers. Instead, he flew with an eerie calm, marked by patience and precision. His fellow pilots often said he had nerves of steel, a man who seemed entirely unshaken even in the thickest fire. Through the roar of engines and the rattle of gunfire, Bong would quietly line up his shot, hold his speed, and fire only when it mattered. He rarely missed. By 1944, air superiority had begun to shift decisively in America's favor. That change wasn't only due to better planes or larger numbers. It was because of men like Bong. As Japan's seasoned aviators were gradually lost, inexperienced replacements took their place, while the United States continued to send battle-hardened pilots with sharpened instincts and unrelenting focus. Richard Bong embodied that new generation, young, confident, and fearless. He stepped willingly into danger time and again. His name began to circulate in enemy briefings, not as a boast, but as a warning, because behind that quiet demeanor was a cold, clinical efficiency, one that made him a name the Japanese could not ignore. From New Guinea to the Philippines and all the way to Borneo, every time Richard Bong took to the skies, it was almost certain that at least one enemy aircraft would not return. Records show that most of his kills were single-engine fighters, the Zero and the Oscar, aircraft that had once dominated the skies in the early years of the war. But Bong's list of victories didn't end there. He had also taken down twin-engine bombers, high-speed reconnaissance planes, and other strategically significant targets. It was clear that he wasn't just a master of dogfights. He was a versatile and lethal pilot, equally effective in interceptions, escort missions, ground support, or precision strikes. In every sense, the sky was his domain. To the Japanese, every aircraft lost was not just a blow to resources or manpower, it was a crack in their confidence. That a young American pilot, one who didn't belong to any famed squadron, could consistently defeat Japanese aviators through sheer skill was deeply unsettling. Bong became a symbol of an enemy they couldn't counter, a reminder that their days of aerial supremacy were coming to an end. And if just one man like Bong could wreak that much havoc, what would happen when the full might of the US Air Force reached its stride? Bong never boasted about his record. When asked, he simply replied, "I'm just doing my job." But those who saw him in action, or worse, those who found themselves in the path of the P-38 named Marge, understood perfectly what that job was. His mission was to bring fear and destruction to the enemy, and throughout 1944, he did it with chilling precision. After fulfilling his duty at the front, Richard Bong returned to the United States in early 1945 to thunderous applause. He was no longer just a soldier, he had become a living symbol of courage and victory. Just weeks after leaving the battlefield, he married his sweetheart Marge, the very woman whose name and face had adorned his fighter plane. It was a rare and peaceful chapter in a life otherwise shaped by war. The military quickly called on him to participate in promotional campaigns, sell war bonds, and help train a new generation of pilots. He took on these responsibilities with the quiet humility of a man who never sought fame. Even as he was honored with the title Ace of Aces, the highest-scoring American fighter pilot in history with 40 confirmed kills, Bong never called himself a hero. But to everyone else, there was no question no one had ever earned the title more. Yet fate can be cruelest to those who shine the brightest. In the summer of 1945, Richard Bong was assigned to test a new jet fighter, the P-80 Shooting Star, a symbol of America's next generation of air power. On the morning of August 6th, the same day the United States dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima, Bong climbed into the cockpit of a P-80A for what would be his final flight. Shortly after takeoff, the aircraft experienced a malfunction. Bong managed to eject, but the altitude was too low for his parachute to fully deploy. Major Richard Bong, America's #1 fighter ace, died at the age of 24, with an entire future still waiting ahead of him. The following day, newspapers across the country reported on two monumental events: the dawn of the nuclear age and the sudden death of an American air hero. The nation was stunned. The 5th Air Force, which had been Bong's wartime home, fell into mourning. General George Kenney, who had once scolded Bong for a reckless stunt over San Francisco and later placed his complete trust in him, said through tears, "We lost someone we loved." He believed that Bong's title as Ace of Aces would endure, because in an age of weapons of mass destruction, no future conflict would last long enough for another pilot to match his record of 40 kills. Richard Dick Bong's name passed into legend. In addition to the many medals awarded posthumously, he was inducted into the National Aviation Hall of Fame in 1986. In his home state of Wisconsin, his name graces a park, a bridge, a museum, and even a former Air Force base. Across the United States, military installations and airfields bear streets, buildings, and classrooms named in his honor. Even at Misawa Air Base in Japan, on the soil of his former adversary, there stands a movie theater named Bong Theater, a quiet gesture that acknowledges how history often remembers not only victory, but valor. Looking back at 1944, the year Japan began to lose its grip on air superiority, one name stands out as a defining marker. Richard Bong did not belong to any elite unit or bask in flashy titles, yet he wrote his own brilliant chapter in the history of war. His legacy was forged through a rare combination of raw talent, unwavering courage, refined discipline, and a relentless drive to fight. He often said, "I'm just doing my job," but from the dense jungles of New Guinea to the burning skies over Leyte, the world knew exactly what that job was: to change the course of the war, one precise trigger pull at a time. The story of Richard Bong, from a humble farm boy in Wisconsin to the nightmare of the Japanese Air Force, is more than just a tale of heroism. It stands as a symbol of quiet strength, unshakable loyalty, and the kind of value that can't be measured in medals or kill counts. He was a man who fought not for glory, but for the country he loved.